Before we read today's selection, we need to take a look at poetry theory. Poetry can be much better understood and enjoyed if you understand some of the devices employed by a poet. Let's start by talking about what is poetry. Well, language is generally used in 3 different ways. The first way is the most common way we use language, and this is to simply communicate information. This is the way we use language in everyday life. Let's take a look at an example of communicating information.
Slept out here?
Well, Amy kept kicking me in her sleep, yelling, "Myron, get off!"
But, we're getting rid of her, right? Rach, please tell me we're getting rid of her.
Joey, I can't do that.
Oh, come on! Last night I was finishing off a pizza, and she said, "Ooh, a moment on the lips, forever on the hips." I don't need that kind of talk in my house.
So there we have an example of using language to simply communicate information. Rachel and Joey are communicating about getting rid of Rachel's sister. The next way language is used is to persuade. We often see this in advertisements and political speeches when we are attempted to be convinced of something. Let's take a look at using language to persuade.
Lynn is trying Colgate Winter Fresh Gel for the first time.
Hey, what a super-looking gel. Let me try. What a cool taste. Let me try. Mom!
Colgate Winter Fresh Gel is a creamy blue gel packed with proven MFP fluoride, the maximum fluoride protection a toothpaste can give.
Lynn, it's good for both of you.
Want some? Sure.
Regular flavor Colgate or Colgate Winter Fresh Gel, maximum fluoride protection in a great tasting gel.
There we saw an example of using language to persuade. In this case, to persuade you to use Colgate toothpaste. The third way we use language is to communicate experience. This is how it is used in poetry and in other literature. Let's take a look at using language to communicate experience.
Life is brilliant. My life is brilliant. My love is pure. I saw an angel, of that I'm sure. She smiled at me on the subway. She was with another man, but I won't lose no sleep on that, 'cause I've got a plan. You're beautiful. You're beautiful. You're beautiful. It's true.
Here we have James Blunt communicating his experience of love. Literature is used to communicate experience. It helps the reader to participate in the experience by broadening and deepening that experience. Poetry's prime concern is with communicating experience. It differs from other literature because it is very compact and condensed. Its language appeals to the reader's intellect, senses, emotions, and imagination. There are a couple of steps to reading a poem that can help them make more sense and increase our enjoyment of them. The first thing we should do is check the title. The title will give you key words and ideas about what the poem will be about. Once we've thought about the title, the second step is to read the poem completely from beginning to end without stopping to evaluate the poem or to judge it. Think about this. We have a poem here by Shel Silverstein. Look at the title of the poem. What do you suppose the poem will be about? Well, the poem is titled Poet's Tree. This gives me an idea that it may be about a particular place where a poet likes to write, or a tree that inspires poetry. Now let's read the poem from beginning to end. Poet's Tree by Shel Silverstein. Underneath the poet tree, come and rest a while with me, and watch the way the word web weaves between the shady story leaves. The branches of the poet tree reach from mountains to the sea, so come and dream or come and climb, just don't get hit by falling rhymes. Once I've read it once, the second reading is to think about the content. You want to consider any unfamiliar words. If there are unfamiliar words, look them up. It is important to your understanding that you know these words. Think about what the experience is that the author is trying to communicate. Find and try to understand figurative language. This we will talk about in later modules. Let's not dwell on it today. Paraphrase difficult lines. This means take difficult lines and put them into your own words to make them make sense. Then it's time to think about the whole poem. Considering Shel Silverstein's poem once again, are there any unfamiliar words in this poem? I look at this poem and I do not see any unfamiliar words, so I do not need to worry about looking them up. What is the author trying to communicate? It sounds to me like he's trying to communicate his experience of writing poetry. Are there any lines that are unclear that need to be paraphrased? Again, the language in this particular poem is quite basic. There are no lines that I need to paraphrase. Next, let's talk about some terms associated with poetry. First of all, we have a verse. A verse is simply a line of poetry. Often this is confused with stanza. A stanza is a poetic paragraph. Wherever you have verses broken up by a blank space, you have a stanza. We can also consider tone, which is the poet or speaker's attitude towards the subject. It can be things like sad, sarcastic, silly, humorous. Let's consider Shel Silverstein's poem once again. How many verses does it have? By simply counting the lines, I will see how many verses. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. This poem has 8 verses. How many stanzas does the poem have? Well, since there are no blank lines, I can say that this poem has 1 stanza. What is the tone of the poem? Well, this poem is quite silly. It's meant to be humorous and fun. Types of poetry. Poems generally fall into one of 2 categories. Conventional. In this type of poetry, we see rhyme, rhythm, and meter. This is a traditional type of poetry. The second type is free verse. This poem has no regular rhyme, rhythm, or meter. The poet expresses himself using poetic license in any way that he or she feels is meaningful. Again, let's take a look at Poet's Tree. What type of poetry is this? Well, I can see that this poem has rhyme. Tree, me, weaves, leaves, tree, see. This tells me that this is conventional poetry. Speaking a little bit more about rhyme, rhyme is the repetition of sounds. We can have 2 basic types of rhyme. We can have internal rhyme, when there's more than one word in one verse that rhyme. And the second type is end rhyme, where the rhyming words come at the end of verses. Rhyme scheme is the pattern of end rhyme. Let's take a look. Does it have rhyme? We already determined that it does have rhyme. Tree, me, weaves, leaves, tree, see, climb, rhyme. Now we have to think about a rhyme scheme. I know it has rhyme, so how do I determine what the rhyme scheme is? I start by taking a look at the first verse, which ends with tree, which is A. I then look at the word me. Does me rhyme with tree? It does, so it is also A. Then I take a look at the third verse, weaves. Does weaves rhyme with me? No, it doesn't. So it would be a B. What about leaves? Leaves, weaves. It also gets B. Tree. Because we already see tree once, we can say that it is A again. C and tree. And then we have climb. Climb does not rhyme with any of the words we have had so far, so it gets a C. Rhyme, climb. These two also rhyme, so it gets a C. So the rhyme scheme for this poem is A, A, B, B, A, A, C, C. That should be enough to get us started on the basics of poetry. Let's now take a look at today's poem.